In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make a Deathshead button. This tutorial is for right-handed users. I'll also do a separate tutorial for left-handed users. I'm going to be using a perlé cotton size 8, a 25mm flat button mold, some beeswax. I'm going to be marking out and so using a button gauge and pencil, and I'll be doing the stick method as opposed to weaving. You'll also need scissors and a tapestry needle. So the first thing that we need to do is mark the button mold. For a Deathshead button, you need quarters. Now, if you're well practiced and you're good at figuring out by eye, there's no need to mark out the quarters. But as a beginner, or if you're doing very matched sets, it's a nice idea to mark them out. Now, rub beeswax on the back, front and sides of your button mold. Again, if you're more experienced, you won't necessarily need to do this. However, it does make it a bit easier as it stops the threads from slipping. So I'm going to use the thread directly from the spool. I'm going to hold the end at the back, pressing it into that beeswax a little bit. Now, lining up so that your pencil marks are going from top to bottom and side to side, we're going to hold the thread taut and working from bottom to top, lay one wrap across. Now you need to thicken that line basically to the point at which the curve starts. It's very hard to say exactly what you need for each thread type, that just comes with experience. But for this, I'm going to lay 5 ends, an end being a piece of thread, side by side at the middle. And you'll notice that I've gone down the middle and then 2 and then 2, and that's just to keep it centered up. So that's 5 ends. Now I'm going to rotate anti-clockwise, and I've kept that thread taut at the back, and I'm going to repeat, working from bottom to top, and then lay another side by side so that I have 5 ends again. Now you'll notice there's a little bit of a slightly loose thread there, and that is where the thread has cut straight across over when you've turned. Don't worry about that, it will be covered. This is your foundation cross. Now rotate anti-clockwise again so that that cross is now an X, and take the thread again, keeping it nice and taut, and work from bottom to top and lay one end so that it anchors on the cross, and it's on the inside part of the cross that it's anchoring. Rotate and repeat. Rotate and repeat. And if you've got that loose thread, just tuck it down. There you go. Rotate and repeat. Continue to do this, placing your next thread inside of the previous. You're working towards the center of the button. Continue to rotate and repeat. Now you can weave through at the back of the button, but what we're going to do now is we're going to add a stick, which will help to create a shank and help also to keep everything nice and straight. So, and if your threads start to curve down a little, you're probably wrapping them just a little bit too tight, so try not to do that. So from the back, place your stick up through the central hole, and now continue your wrapping. Only this time what will happen is your thread at the back will wrap around the stick slightly as you rotate and wrap. Your thread should be as straight as possible, so adjust as you go if you need to. They should be tight, but if they're too tight, they'll run the risk of slipping off. And don't worry about leaving some space in between the threads, particularly with the twisted thread. The space works better than trying to shove too many threads onto the face of the button, which will just make it a messy button and look quite loose. So we keep wrapping, and you'll see that the button is getting quite filled up now, and that woven pattern is showing at the corners. As you approach the center of the button, if your stick is protruding through, as will happen if you're using a pin, for instance, instead of a stick, push it down gently, but do not remove the stick. Don't let it drop out or your button will come apart. Although in saying that, if you're not happy with your button, you haven't cut any thread, you haven't wasted any yet, so you can unwrap it and just start again. Now you see what's happened here is I've just shoved them in a little bit too closely on one side and not quite close enough on the other. So you can just adjust a little with your fingers if you need to. And there we go. Fill your button and line those threads up. So now we need to fasten off at the back. So don't remove the stick. Remember, do not remove the stick yet. You need to thread the end of your thread onto a needle. And now at this point, you need to secure those crossed threads at the back before you remove the stick. You can take the stick out. You'll see you've got a little bit of a shank that's formed. And then double check at the front that you're happy with the placement. Tweak it if you need to. And then tighten up those stitches at the back just to make sure that nothing is going to come loose across the front. Then I like to weave through a bit at the bottom. And then pull up, trim close, and the end of the thread usually will sink nicely back in. There's your adjustments. Yeah. One Deathshead button.